a lot of actors can eventually give you something that makes it look like they're emotionally struggling. But the thing with Grey Havens was it was over the course of hours that you had to stay in this emotionally vulnerable spot. So that was a tough thing. What else was challenging? I mean, when in a lot of the battles, certainly when Boromir is coming towards the end of his life, and some of the battles on Pelennor Fields, we're on our knees, Billy and I, because to make it look like that we're a guy and the humans are a lot taller. We're on our knees. Also, Pete is saying to us, even though you're on your knees, that's supposed to be Hobbit's feet. So I want you to be extremely mobile the way that you move. You know, you're on uneven ground and it's tough. You're on your knees trying to stay active. And it's kind of tough. So I think that can be tough. I really enjoyed the scene where Merry and Pippin kind of split, you know, where Pippin has looked in the Palantir and then Gandalf realizes there's a problem and he's putting him on the horse and he's like, we have to go this way to pull the eye of the Dark Lord in that direction, and these two are getting broken. I really enjoyed that scene from an emotional point of view, because in the extended version, the scene is longer and then I run up a set of stairs and I have a little scene with Vigo, and again, you're at the edge of emotion. But I seem to remember over the course of that 2 or 3 days that we filmed that again, a little bit like the Grey Havens, you're just on the edge of crying for 2 days, and it just takes a lot out of you emotionally to stay in that space.
There's a really specific challenging scene that we shot within the first block of shooting before we had our kind of Christmas break. So we started shooting October of '99 and then took a break for Christmas and came back in January. But right before, we were down in Queenstown shooting kind of Abraham Hen, the Uruk-hai sort of storming the hills, Boromir's death, all of that. So we were very much shooting primarily, in fact, up until that moment, we only shot Fellowship of the Ring. And there was a flood in Queenstown, and some of our sets were washed away. And we have what is called a wet weather cover, which is basically you've got some interior sequence that's always being held in case there's some inclement weather that forces you inside, so you can't shoot exteriors. And the wet weather cover was a scene from the third film with Frodo and Sam and Gollum on the steps of Cirith and Andy wasn't there yet. And so we ended up having to move to this wet weather cover kind of in 24 hours, and I hadn't even begun thinking about where Frodo was at that particular stage. I mean, I certainly from an intellectual standpoint knew, but I hadn't started working on that part of the character. Because I knew that I had a schedule ahead of me that afforded me the time to get there, you know. And so then suddenly, overnight, I had to work out where Frodo was emotionally. Very different from where he is at the end of Fellowship of the Ring. And a sequence with Gollum before Andy Serkis was there. And I believe it was our producer, Rick Forrest, reading lines off as Gollum. And another crazy thing about that was that we didn't shoot the reverse coverage on that scene for a year. So we shot one side of it, and then a year later got back to the scene. But it was hard. It was kind of amazing. It was sort of like ripping the Band-Aid off. I remember feeling like, okay, now we can do anything. If we're gonna start bouncing around, if we can go to this extreme and feel like there's some ownership of where we are at this point, the ability to then bounce around from film to film chronologically was made much, much easier.
Thank you.
Thanks.